Welcome to our Masterclass, Discover NetScaler's Security Arsenal, Expert Insights and Tips. Today we have joined with us Ronan O'Brien, NetScaler Product Specialist, Michael Shuster, CEO and Chief Architect for Ferroque Systems, Todd Chu, President of Ferroque Systems, and myself, Amber. Hi everybody, I look after marketing here at Ferroque. Ronan has worked in the web application hosting and delivery industry since 1998. Early in his career, he built and managed web platform applications for both startups and global enterprises. He joined NetScaler as a technical account manager in 2006, helping customers with WAF installations for both NetScaler and Teros, which NetScaler later acquired. Since then, he has held various technical roles at NetScaler, including training instructor and pre-sales engineer. Ronan is a Dublin City University graduate in software engineering, and when he's not NetScalering, he enjoys sailing, surfing, cooking, and the great outdoors. Michael is the CEO of Ferroque Systems and a highly recognized Citrix consulting partner in North America. Serving the role of an architect, Michael has sat on Citrix's consulting team for over half a decade and has led many of Citrix's most significant consulting engagements. He regularly contributes to Citrix's leading practices and documentation. And Todd Chu is the president of Ferroque Systems. His previous consulting company, TH Consulting, was acquired by Citrix in 2012, at which point he became the director of Citrix Consulting Services Canada. Todd joined Ferroque in 2020, and the company is now a Platinum Plus partner in Canada. Welcome, gentlemen. It's great to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks.
NetScaler is the only application delivery and security platform that uses a one-pass architecture for traffic processing. This capability enables NetScaler to perform many functions simultaneously, including security inspections, to reduce latency and improve performance. NetScalers literally power the internet, with approximately 75% of internet traffic being handled by a NetScaler at some point in their flow. From the world's largest e-commerce sites to the world's largest smartphone networks, NetScaler is there, and in nearly all of the Fortune 500 enterprises, making it the most battle-tested application delivery controller and load balancing platform on the market. Today, we'll be going over core security features of NetScaler and highlighting three specific ones. We'll be looking at protecting Citrix Gateway and close with some key takeaways. To end our webinar today, we'll be doing a roundtable discussion. So if you have any questions along the way, please add them to the chat and we'll be sure to get them at the end. I'm gonna hand it over to these two wonderful gentlemen. You guys can sit back and relax. Enjoy.
All right, thank you, Amber. Appreciate the introduction. So let's start talking about some core security features here. So it should come to no surprise that security functions are at the core of NetScaler. As a network device fronting back-end applications and web servers, NetScaler allows the implementation of OSI model layers 2 and 3 protections, ranging from ARP response to SYN flood attack mitigations, and of course, traffic ACLs, the really basic stuff. Things get a bit more interesting when we start looking at the OSI model layers 4 and 7. We get a myriad of other security protections that come into play, including a rich set of SSL and TLS controls and offloading, rate limiting capabilities, HTTP security protections, authentication functions to front end your websites, traffic filtering functions such as rewrite and responders as well. And the last two are actually pretty interesting, as they're the core features for manipulating and dynamically routing traffic based on client request and related contexts. But they also play a key role in security controls for dropping traffic, enforcing security headers, or masking internal URLs, just to name a few examples of many. And then, of course, we've got our Web App Firewall, which we'll be talking about at greater length today, and has been a mainstay of the product since the 2005 acquisition of Teros. Before we get too deep in, we're going to start talking about a few things here related to just the packet flow, just to add a bit more context to exactly how NetScalers work in terms of processing traffic through them, no matter what it is. Now, we're not expecting anyone to actually read this diagram. We've provided a link to you there for that if you're so inclined to do so. But we're placing it here just to illustrate that there is an intelligent processing flow for each packet traversing a NetScaler. NetScaler's features can broadly be categorized into data switching, firewall security, optimization, policy infrastructure. And then as we look at packet flow, and which is the key focus here of this diagram. Packets may be affected by one or more features on a NetScaler, usually more. And as you can see here, there's a lot of features. So how does this impact performance? Well, because the NetScaler is a single pass architecture, which is a cornerstone differentiator against competitors like F5, et cetera, performance doesn't degrade as traffic flows through traffic request and response matrices. For those keen on details, again, we provided the link, and it is worth looking at for some circumstances to understand what becomes before what in terms of a flow. As in more complicated flows, it may be required to understand where things come into play as far as troubleshooting and various things. With that in mind, there are some considerations for some key feature in terms of where the traffic is evaluated in the flow, which should be appreciated. And I wanted to highlight this over to Ronan, who can talk about a couple of interesting differentiators here, things to keep in mind as well. Ronan?
Sure, thanks a million, Michael. So yeah, you can see here, the main thing to take from this is that there's two flows. We see here request and response. So we don't just protect requests, we actually parse the response as well. So this is a major differentiator between some of the WAF products out there, which simply, they look at a request and they block all the bad stuff, but they're not necessarily looking at the response side. And that's where we do we can look for things like credit cards and stop data exfiltration of known specific formats, credit cards, email addresses, that kind of thing. So we do examine the responses coming back through. You'll also see there, the AAA is quite high up, so you're performing authentication. The VPN server is used for gateway. Our Citrix customers will know of that, more about that later on, but we process everything in a single thread. So it means that we don't jump around between the different features where you would maybe do compression first and then you decide to do something else next. Other products allow you to do that, but what that results in is really, really slow performance. So with this model, it allows you to configure the features you want. It steps in when you want, and it gives you the performance that is head and shoulders above the rest, which we'll see when we look at the NSS Labs report later on. So I think we can move on and we take a look at some of the broader security features.
All right. Yep. Thank you, Ronan. So now that we've covered some baseline security fundamentals and traffic flows, let's get into more advanced functions. So the NetScaler is more than a load balancer and an application delivery controller. It's a security device that has numerous advanced features that are relevant to modern enterprises, and in many cases appropriate to run on NetScaler versus an upstream security device so as to reduce performance impacts, or some other caveats that we come across when doing so. These features include the list shown in the diagram, and each one we could really do a webinar on, and maybe we will. But for the sake of focus and time, today we're going to focus on WAF, bot management, and API protection, or API gateway, as they are all actually quite interrelated. So with that in mind, we're going to flip over to bot management first. Alrighty, so what is bot management? Well, bot management, to put it plainly, is the act of determining whether traffic is coming from an automated platform, aka bots or bot networks, or from actual human beings. And over the last decades, bots have become a real problem on the internet, as they're easy to deploy, and then they can take actions ranging from annoyances to outright dangerous actions. And next question is, well, what do the bots do? Well, not all bots are bad, but to be frank, most are on the internet. And bots are, essentially, to put it simply, to oversimplify it, they're an evolution of malicious annoyances that we used to deal with from several decades ago, with spam mailers running their operations off Python scripts. Bot networks are easy to take advantage of these days and handle a wide range of activities related to security, influence, or e-commerce that we've got a slide on later. Bots can be coded to monitor competitor websites to automate price adjustments. They can orchestrate brute force login attacks against web assets and login pages. They can attempt to exploit vulnerabilities and more. If you do not think this concerns you, we'll think again, because it's not like the operators of these platforms are particularly scrutinizing in their targeted websites. Data has shown that bot traffic is responsible for a large percentage of traffic on the internet. So even if their actions on some sites of yours are ultimately harmless for your given sites, they're sapping away resources and bandwidth from real users at minimum. It's a form of network spam, if you will, in the best case scenario for you. On this other slide over here, just providing some visibility on examples. We aren't going to spend any time talking about these in details. Feel free to screenshot this and go back to it. We just wanted to take a moment to display some common uses of bot attacks specifically. That is the use of bots to take negative impacts against, negative actions against a website, causing an impact. And I'm going to hand things off to Ronan now to delve a little bit deeper into how bots are affecting the internet with a bit more context.
Sure. So, like anything that exists for good in the world, there's always those who go to turn it around and make a quick buck. So we can see here in this pie chart, ad fraud alone cost the industry $18 billion, right? So that was in 2018. If you go to statista.com, you'll see that that figure is around $84 billion for 2023. So the cost is rising almost exponentially, right? So not only does this have a cost, so people are basically paying for ads and no one's actually looking at them, the infrastructure is also being utilized. That's your throughput. If you have resources hosted in the cloud, you're paying for the I/O, you're paying for data in and out, you're paying for the web servers to host it. It's all additional cost and you get none of the benefit because humans aren't seeing it, right? For those that are interested, bots aren't necessarily illegal. Many countries don't necessarily have a law around it, and what they're doing sometimes is not illegal, but it's highly annoying and can be disruptive to someone's business. So not necessarily like hacking, but depending on what the bot actually does. If it does, it takes someone offline, then that could be. But maybe filling inventory, taking inventory off temporarily, and then dissipating and then appearing back on again, disrupting flow, that may not be. Sometimes people will go in and they'll book particular appointments for public state things like getting your car checked or something, and then they'll sell them all later on, and you find that there's none in the next 3 months and someone is selling something that should be for free. So those are the sort of use cases that you find. So considering the legal status, it's no surprise that there are businesses out there selling these sort of things with bot as a service. Right? If you do a search, you'll find not only services for sale, but you'll find reviews. You'll find, hey, top 10 retail bots to pick if you want to, snag that, rare pair of trainers or sneakers, or you want to get that concert ticket. There's bots that are out there. And lastly, cloud services, they've made it easier than ever for these services to exist. For those running their own bots, they can deploy them and execute them wherever they want. The express aim of earning an income potentially on the back of your business, but also, more importantly, impacting the experience of your real human customers, and that will ultimately cost you some revenue. So if we move on and we will see what can NetScaler do to prevent this, right? So to increase the security, protect your assets from online abuse, NetScaler will provide a comprehensive security solution which will provide a sophisticated first line of defense against bots. So we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that in a second. It also knows your web application or your API intimately. It knows what requests should be made and which requests are not part of your standard operational procedures. So it'll look at, for example, it'll know that one form field should be numbers, another form field should be letters. When it sees something in the wrong place, you can just say, I'm not going to let that through. Right, so anyone messing around, any of that. As a by the by, a lot of if you do examine public-facing traffic, you will see a lot of bot traffic hitting. A lot of that is reconnaissance traffic. It's these are the bad guys using bots to do reconnaissance on your external-facing websites, looking for vulnerable software, vulnerable servers, looking for the versions of software that's out there that's running on your web server, the version of PHP, the version of Apache that you're running, and so on. So you'll see these scans going on, and they then take that information, and then that's used in a speared attack later on. Lastly, the last thing NetScaler can do is that we can recognize hidden or shadow APIs that the networking or security team may not even be aware exists. So we will look at the requests and responses, and we can identify that in amongst the usual web traffic and say there's an API, and then we can then offer to protect and secure those APIs. So moving into bot, what are the techniques that we use to protect or to mitigate bot traffic? We'll break these down in a second, but effectively we have signatures. Right? So signatures, that's like the low-hanging fruit. We can identify. We know what the good bots are. We know what the bad bots are. We've identified them. They have certain characteristics that we know. We also look at behavior. So if we see a lot of 100 requests from a single a single session, we know that can't be a person requesting that, because no one, unless you're hammering the refresh button, even then you don't necessarily want that. So I can identify that and block that traffic. We also use IP reputation. We know the bad IP addresses on the internet. More on that in a second. And lastly, we have lists of what's known good traffic. Here's the list of things we don't want to see. Right, we blacklist. So breaking that down, all of these components are used to protect your public assets, your public web applications, your e-commerce apps, your public APIs. And let's have a look at how those are actually done. So signatures are comprised. It's an actively updated list. It updates automatically once you configure it to do so. It'll automatically go and pull down the latest signatures from netscaler.com. If we break down, then the next one is behavioral based. So we look at device fingerprinting. There's JavaScript we can inject into the request to detect mouse movements, keyboard movements, to differentiate between humans and the bots. We have IP reputation, and this is our partner Webroot, has a whole farm of honeypot servers out there, and they recognize bad behavior like spammers, botnets, cloud-based IP addresses as all these categories. So you can choose to block a category or several categories on its own, or you can choose to block the whole lot of bad IP addresses, things you may not want to see hitting your websites or your APIs. And lastly, we have the whitelist and blacklist. So these lists, these can be used to customize. You can say, okay, I only want requests for this host name to be allowed through, or a particular IP address, or I want to block a particular IP address. So we can decide what we want to see. And lastly, we even have what's called bot traps. So that would be in the behavior-based category, where we include a link that has like a 1 pixel size clickable area, and that will denote if someone actually requests that, we know that can be a bot, because a human wouldn't see it, wouldn't click on it. So it's a bot just simply following every single link in the page, and that's one way to identify it. So we have a honeypot trap. So all of these are available via NetScaler bot management, and the action. So what do we do when we see this? We can drop the request, which means it just disappears. Obviously we want to log. We can do stats on that as well, so we get diagnostics and analytics. Or we can offer a captcha response back, where we prompt the user to perform some arithmetic, do some calculations like that. Choose the pictures, whatever, to differentiate them from the bot traffic. So examples of how here's some examples of how this works. Again, we're not going to go through these individually, but this just kind of shows you what each one does, and drills down into, give you a bit more detail into the use case and the benefits of each individual one, but I've kind of gone through that already. So let's take a quick look at some configuration. It wouldn't be a masterclass without some hands-on. So here is Pingdom. Pingdom is what you can use to check the performance of your website. It's a publicly available tool, and you can see I have executed that already, and it has achieved some results. So it's downloaded some content, gives you an idea of the measurement. Now, I may not want this to be used against my site because it makes requests, so I can choose to block that. I go into my NetScaler console, I'm refreshing, there's nothing really coming in there in the last 15 minutes, and I'm dropping into my bot configuration. So this is the bot. This is the vServer. Here's the vServer where traffic is terminated. I'm going to open that up and we're going to see what policies are applied to it. Scroll down and you'll see that there's no security policies applied there, just some analytics policies. So I'm going to click Add. And I'm going to choose my bot policy. So I've already created this. It takes a few seconds to create. I'll take a look at the bot policy and profile in a second. I'm going to apply my policy, and that's it. So I can apply that on the vServer, or I can go into the feature and I can bind it from here. It's the same end result. Going into the profile itself, you just can create new profile. I'll just show you the signatures. So here's the signatures that are already included. I'm just going to show you how to search through. There's you know, a couple of thousand here. So I'm going to type name, but ping them, and I can see the bot is listed. It's a bad bot, and I want to drop that traffic whenever I see it. Right? Simple as that. You can see which traffic, and the rule is also enabled, that's just automatically done. That's the way it comes out of the box. I go in here and type my URL again, nswafgenie. nswafgene.ie, and I choose my location and I hit start, and it's going to send a bunch of requests there and try to measure it. Now, quickly I drop in and go into the var log, and it wasn't quick enough because the test is finished, but we can see the last couple of entries in there. I can see that NetScaler has detected that and it has dropped the traffic, right, because it has the block, the block action in there. Hopefully you can see that. So we go back in there again. I'm going to choose a different location to send my requests from. It doesn't allow you to use it too many times, and we can see a second lot of blocks there where the request has been dropped. Now, this takes maybe 30 seconds to filter through into NetScaler console. So you do a refresh, and I can see there are 6 bot blocks that are in there. We can click in to those, and it's possible to drill down and you get some more information, which was this is the overall dashboard for my whole NetScaler estate. But in this case, I only have one NetScaler in here that's actually active, so it's pretty obvious that that's the only one there. But you can click down, you can drill down and see which NetScaler it came in on, what type of bot attack was made, which was the signature that blocked it, and so on.
Jumping to NetScaler WAF. NetScaler Web App Firewall is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated features of the NetScaler. Many customers do not realize they have it, I find, and end up spending more money on other WAFs to front NetScaler VIPs, which can add performance degradation to web apps by adding another layer of packet processing. Furthermore, many cloud WAFs cannot do what NetScaler WAF does, and Ronan is going to talk about that a little later. Just some things to watch out for. NetScaler WAF has had a ton of investment over the past number of years and has been winning accolades again and again, and is now the fastest WAF on the market. WAF is great for PCI compliance, protects unknown and known attacks, and integrates with popular pen testing and scanning tools, and provides observability into the attacks being carried out against your web apps. And we'll talk about these in a bit more shortly. One of my favorite features of NetScaler WAF is its dynamic profiling of web apps, because let's face it, network guys relying on devs to let them know how their app works and how it's functioning and things that it calls is like pulling teeth. So the automated analysis of on NetScaler WAF for traffic that's going through it to determine what protections might be suitable for this given web app can certainly close the gap a bit. And also help you from just turning on all sorts of protections, which aren't particularly great either. I mean, some organizations we find want to turn on more features that they necessarily need for a web app, and that can potentially just reduce the scalability on the appliance as well. So it's good to understand what your web app is doing so you turn on the right protections for them and optimize your resources as well. So let's talk a little bit about the security models that the NetScaler WAF uses. So to understand at a high level how it works, it uses what we refer to as a hybrid security model. And it does not rely on negative only models where it applies signatures for known vulnerabilities, nor does it rely exclusively on a positive model where it learns app functions by users interacting with it, which can also be automated partially, with web app on the web app to understand behaviors to help protect against unknown attacks when actions are not aligned to what has been learned. But it combines both of those models, the negative and the positive, thus the term hybrid model. So with that in mind, let's dive a bit more into WAF. And for that, I'm going to hand it over to Ronan again.
The benefits of that is performance. If we have a negative security model, it's easy for us to block against that. We look at the request, find the match, we drop it. The positive security model means we have to know the application. We may have to read a bit further into the payload, and we're also looking at the responses coming back. Note that requests can usually be small, responses are usually bigger. All right. So NSS Labs, these guys conduct some of the most comprehensive third-party testing in the industry. They provide their feedback and research analysis to the C-level execs. And the results of their test reveal that NetScaler App Firewall delivers the lowest total cost of ownership per protected megabit per second. So that price performance is up to 60% less cost than some of the other vendors in the market, right? In the recommended list that you would see from other analyst reports, right? So I'll give you one thing to note, that this test was done before our recent code changes we made in late 13.1, early 14.1, which have actually significantly decreased our time to protect even more so. So if we run this test again, you'll see that we're actually even faster because we've made some really significant changes in our performance of code. We successfully identified and blocked attacks using the suggested evasion techniques and passed 100% of the stability and reliability tests for NSS Labs. Right. So some customers take their security really seriously, and they'll regularly scan their endpoints. Maybe you scan your endpoints. I'd be interested to know if you do use a web app vulnerability scanner, maybe drop that into the text. I'm just curious as to what people are using out there if you do scan your endpoints. But we integrate with several of them. We can actually take the report generated by these scanners, which may find some vulnerabilities. They say this URL is vulnerable to SQL injection, or there's cross-site scripting over here, or cross-site request forgery there. We'll take that report, we can upload it on the NetScaler. It will automatically create the protection against those vulnerabilities and apply it via a signature. You then run your report again through the NetScaler, and you'll see all of those vulnerabilities will have been patched or closed off. So before you get a few red lights, upload your report, green lights all the way. What that does is it buys you time to then go and talk to your backend application developers, and they can go and resolve some of those issues if you want to. But if there's no internal access, then you're still fully protected from the internet. So it's up to you whether or not you want to do that. So that's called virtual patching. If you don't have a third-party application scanner, if you don't have one of those, it's interesting to note that NetScaler Console, which is what we used to call ADM service, is also capable of scanning your web applications. So we can scan them, and it'll detect the platform it's running on, if it's Linux, if it's Windows, if it's IIS, if it's Apache, if it's Nginx, what web server you're running, and it will suggest signatures to protect against known vulnerabilities for those platforms. It'll also look for vulnerable fields, any sort of fields and any fields vulnerable to SQL injection, and it'll create a recommended configuration that you can apply directly to your NetScaler from that scan results page. So that's something that we have. It's called WAF recommendations in NetScaler Console. So that would be something to keep an eye out for. Now, not only do we do the scanning, but we also provide analytics. So this is a key element where you can see your particular applications that you would have on your NetScaler. So these would be your web-based applications, like Cerner, Workday, Podium, and so on. These are your web apps. When you the NetScaler will look at those, it'll treat them separately, and for each one of those, there is going to be a score or an index. So you can see there, there might be some boxes coming up, so those are applications, and the next box will show you the threat index. If your website or our API is available to the internet, you will see threats. That's just, it's a given. You know, just put a web server on the internet, look at the web logs, it'll scare the hell out of you. Go to the safety index, and this will actually show you, are there any attacks being identified that aren't being blocked, right? So you will see threats. It's okay if that is up at 6, it's seeing a lot of threats, but if your safety index goes high, then you know, hey, there's something getting through here that I should be blocking. So it's an immediate location for you to go, and from a security perspective, you can see that, and you can look at the last hour, day, week, month, and so on. So where else can we go from here? I can open up one of those applications, and clicking down through, the first thing I can notice here is we see the top application is under attack. And on the right-hand side, you see a trend. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? What number of attacks are we seeing? The next thing on the list is, I'm trying to read this now, it's a little bit small. On my notes, we have the top clients. So what clients are accessing? This is where you'll see if there's a lot of bot traffic, a lot of repeated requests, you'll see this coming in, a particular IP address popping up regularly. You also see the locations. If you have the geo mapping option turned on in the NetScaler app firewall settings, we can see where these attacks are coming from. Okay, the NetScaler console service has an IP lookup function, so we can quickly see if there's a country, a lot of traffic coming from a country that you don't expect to be doing business with, then that would lead you to turn around, and I can use 3 lines of configuration to block traffic from a particular country using the onboard geo IP database. You can see threat detection, if the threats that are in there, and lastly, you can see the attack variation trends. So this lets you know if you see a big ramp going up, then you know it could be something like a more type of coordinated type of attack rather than the hit and miss of kind of the script kiddies and automated bots and scanners that are hitting your site, right? So a lot of information in this dashboard, the sort of thing you have up in your network operations center, in your NOCs, to look up on a screen somewhere if you have web applications that are critical to the running of your business. Now, let's move on to the WAF. What does the WAF actually do? So, a lot of people would say that, web, it just blocks, right? So WAFs block, but we do more than that. We have done more for that ever since, even from the days of Teros, as Michael mentioned earlier on. So back as far as 2005 and before that. So NetScaler acquired this 2005. We've had a WAF since then, but the Teros product is even older. We block traffic. That's naturally what we do. But we also transform or neutralize traffic. This means that we can have a request coming through a particular form field where someone might have a word typed in or a phrase which might trigger our protection, but we want to allow it through anyway. So, for example, if it's a scripting trigger, we can neutralize by re-encoding the greater than, less than brackets. So it'll still look like that, but it'll be ampersand some number, ampersand 27 or something. So the web server will not interpret that as a script, but if you look at it, if I'm looking at it in the database, it'll appear as a angled bracket, right? So you do the same thing with SQL injection, where someone puts in a comma to step out of a variable function and enter in a SQL command. We stick a second one in there, so the backend web server will not interpret that as a SQL injection attack. We'll obviously log the requests, and the last two are statistics and analytics, which we'll see. We've just seen that in ADM. And we have learning. Learning helps us build the positive security model. So typically, our customers would do user acceptance testing with learning turned on. This is from a trusted network. We can learn from a trusted network only with their employees. And we create a pattern of known good behavior. And then we simply apply any exceptions that have come up in that case. And this is a standard way of deploying NetScaler Application Firewall without the massive overhead of asking your developers to come up with a known good list. Now, the last thing we'll talk about before we move on to the WAF demo, just a quick shout out to the cloud-based WAFs out there, right? They're extremely popular, and for the right use case, when they're configured properly, they can do the job more or less. But there's a few truths you should know about these. Right, so first of all, out of the box, when you deploy these, they actually are very easy to bypass. People think of, okay, I've ticked the box in my cloud portal and I've deployed it off. And it's a pretty good article here. I might be biased because I did write it, but if you just Google for bypass cloud firewalls, you get it, and it just goes into a bit more detail on how this actually works. So there is all popular cloud-based WAFs, they do have their Achilles heel. Some of them are impacted more than others, but one of these vulnerabilities is the capability, its ability to scan slightly larger than normal payloads by default. So payload scanning is computationally expensive in the cloud, and obviously they like to scale out and reuse resources. So most of the cloud-based WAFs have turned off deep inspection or payload inspection. It's just turned off. And what that means is that if someone sends a request in that is too big, it just lets it through. Anything that's after the particular threshold, which is as small as 8K in some cases, which is about 4 or 5 cookie values could fill up 8K. If it's bigger than that, it doesn't scan past that. So attackers just pad out the first part of the request, and the rest of it just slips through, right? Just like that rocket bursting through the cloud, it just pierces right through, and an attack lands on a web server with a SQL injection or a cross-site script. Cloud-based WAF doesn't know anything about it. So just be aware of that. I'm just letting people know. Naturally, one of the reasons we say this, of course, because NetScaler does not suffer from this. We're not cloud-based. We have lots of CPU processing. We're very fast and we're optimized, so we can scan the full payload, and we do. All right. So onto the demo now. And just a quick note: anything you see here is for educational purposes only. So some interesting stuff coming up. So here we have my NetScaler again, and I'm taking a look at my WAF profile. So should be opening that up now, and you can see on the right we have our security checks, and this is where you can turn protections on and off. You can see the actions across the top. I've got block, log, start, and learn, and I'm going to move down here to some of the protections. You'll see that there's some of them have blocking turned on, some don't. The learning field, this has to be enabled for us to learn traffic as we go through. I'm just taking a quick look here at the general settings for my WAF profile, and I can see here I'm using a custom HTML page. So a custom page is what I would use for UAT, because it tells me exactly the attack that has been detected. That's the sort of thing you would leave on in production, but we have a sample one of these that you can download from our support pages. It's just handy to know when you're doing UAT what's actually blocked it. There is a transaction number you can just have. If for production, you can have a standard error page with a transaction number, and that can be used to identify the actual block in the logs. Now, this is the application we're going to use. I like this one. It's OWASP web code, and there's lots of different stuff in here. It's like a training tool, and you can see here I'm using Z attack proxy. This allows me to trap the request after it's left my browser before it gets sent to the website. So here I've trapped the request, I've purchased a TV, and I'm coming in here, and now I can manipulate that request before it goes on to the web server. So you have hidden fields here like prices, which I shouldn't be able to edit. It doesn't allow me to edit it in the web form, but I can edit it here after it's left my browser. So I don't like the price. I'm looking at the quantity, and that's how I can manipulate a web form to go and buy something for something more than I should have. That's because there's no server-side validation being done in the web application. So how do we protect against that? I'm going to pop down here to form field consistency, and this means we're going to examine every single form that gets delivered out through the NetScaler. It's going to sign every single field that if it's changed, like I've just changed it there, it'll detect that. Now, I had some problems earlier on with this demo. I had to clear the settings from the browser, because the browser unfortunately does cache things. So I've cleared that, and now we're going to pop into our application again, and I'm going to go into the lesson. I'm going to have to. Now you can see there, yeah, I have that. That's because it has the browser has cached that value. I'm using a different browser here in this case, so it's a different one, and I can see the price. I'm going to change, and you can see the signature below. Look at that. I'm changing the quantity, and that's the signature. That is the unique signature for each individual form field that we validate on the way back in, and that's obviously tied to a unique session cookie as well. I've tried to manipulate that, and you can see I get blocked there again. All right. So those results, of course, they get fed back to NetScaler console in the same way, and the WAF fields, you'll see the attack types, and we have metrics there to talk about that. But we're kind of running short on time, so we will move on. Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ronan. We're going to dive into application gateway now, API gateway. So moving on to applications and APIs, the next frontier is, this is really the next frontier in app and network security. So APIs are incredibly prominent for interlinking automated workflows and streamlining how businesses and technologies function. This was something that was commonly done in many on-premises applications, and especially with the prevalence of SaaS apps and whatnot over the last decade plus. There's just more and more APIs that just pop up into products left, right, and center, especially for web apps and SaaS apps and what have you. And to put this in another comparison, not unlike mass production lines, automation that you can get through things like APIs bring speed and innovation and integration, but they present weak points for exploitation as well. Bad actors who can intercept and manipulate API workflows can capture significant amounts of sensitive data and direct web apps to take undesired actions, which may have detrimental consequences on your business operations or on customer data. So what does an API gateway do exactly? Well, API gateways front the API endpoints that ingest API requests to protect them from abuse. They add routing intelligence to complement and enhance the API's architecture itself, and they monitor how APIs are consumed. And they aid in the life cycle management of APIs through, design, testing, UAT, getting into production, and whatnot. And we're going to hand it over to Ronan now for a deeper dive into API gateway and its underlying functions.
Thanks, Michael. So why do we need an API gateway? This example on the left is kind of what you'd typically see with organic growth of automation and API in a company. So someone needs a particular service, the business, especially if multiple lines of business or different business pillars, someone goes off and contracts it and says, okay, we need an API to do X, then someone else needs an API to do Y. The APIs talk to each other, maybe at the back end, maybe they share a database, maybe they don't. And then you sort of build it up kind of a little bit Frankenstein style, where the APIs get built up like that. So it organically, it can grow out. That means you have very disparate functionality. Sometimes a project runs for a specific period of time with a contracted developers. They go in, they do their work, they're gone again. So, when an additional layer of security is required or a small modification to the app is needed, there may not even be a developer there to do that. So that's a challenge. Each change you have needs to be executed on each of the individual services that you can see there. If they want to do authentication, have to go into each one and apply authentication. Remember, it could be coded by a different developer. So there's going to be development charges involved with that and lead time. And of course, SSL, everything should be encrypted these days. So each one will need its own SSL cert. And we know we've got to love the 1 year max duration requirement that we have now. So you're always constantly cycling those SSL certs to keep them updated. And of course, if one of them needs to be patched, then you bring down the API server. It's offline, you patch the server and it comes back up again, so you have outages. So what do you get when you use an API gateway? This is what you get. You get a single point where all your apps flow through. You can use a single certificate on there. You can deploy a single authentication mechanism which is shared across all of the APIs if you want. So that gives you consistency. You can get analytics on the API server performance through NetScaler Console Web Insights. Scaling up and down is easy. You can add as many services as you want. You simply, you add multiple user services, for example, and you can load balance them. We have that functionality in there as well. There's no downtime. So if you once you have multiple services, we're able to gracefully shut down a service by draining connections off, sending no more new requests to a backend. When it's fully drained, you can bring that service down, do whatever you want. It's not going to impact any of the live traffic. And lastly, we have blue, green, or canary deployment support. And that's where you can choose to send a percentage of new traffic to a test application. You monitor the progress of that application. If it's okay, then we can actually send more and more percent to that new application. And that's the way people do their continuous integration, continuous delivery, deployment model, so CI/CD. So all of that is possible with an API gateway. It's in NetScaler. It's easy to deploy. Right? Those are the benefits. So what we have is a comprehensive protection to secure your next generation of application. So this gives you full control over your APIs. There's a huge variety of authentication mechanisms to choose from on NetScaler. Usually APIs use OAuth, but we have multi-factor authentication, whatever is necessary, whatever is needed, we have it, and it's easy to turn on. A couple of lines of config and you've turned it on. Building that into the application itself can be very tricky. You can choose how many API calls a client can make. So with rate limiting, we can choose to block something upstream if they exceed an allowance. There's even a sort of a sin bin function that you have in NetScaler rate limiting, so we can block subsequent requests for a time period of say 5 minutes before a particular client is allowed to resume communication. And lastly, since NetScaler is a layer 7 device, it can examine any aspect of the inbound request and route it to a specific server or farm of servers based on that component. Right? So this could be the requested host name, the username, the group to which the user belongs, the origin country. So right then down to the URL or URL parameter, I could say this goes to that server, this goes to this server. So routing it entirely is simple to do on the NetScaler using App Expert policy configuration, and that allows you to scale out APIs with a sophisticated backend infrastructure without requiring a complex front end or multiple external host names, multiple external IP addresses. It could just be one URL that you expose to the internet and allows you to scale out and build a huge, complex, sophisticated API on the back end. So some examples in here again. This is a good sort of screen grab, but typical examples of where our customers use API protection. So authentication, authorization is actually a huge one. And this is one of the OWASP API top 10s, where they discover that lots of APIs, because they're not something that are accessed by humans, say the API is supposed to do X, but in fact, if you try it, you can actually do Y, Z, W, and ABC as well, even though you shouldn't be allowed to. So they're not necessarily developed with the same security as a web application, and that is very important because they're not stress tested in that particular way. Is it functional? Here's an API. They send that information to their partner, and off they go. So let's take a little look at how that can be secured and locked down in our API demo. Now this one we may have to slow down a bit if you want to watch this later on in a recording. So here is the NetScaler console, and you can see here the discovered APIs we found. We can drop into policies. We can create a policy. We give it a name, and we choose the deployment, and it will go and create the policy based on what has been discovered. So it can see the verbs. It can see the gets, this, post, that. Here's the URL. It can identify that, and we can see where the destination is going to. We can choose that in here as well. So you have full visibility over that deployment model. I hit apply, and it will create that configuration for me. So we can actually create a configuration to do the API gateway functionality, which you can then use to then apply a WAF policy to that if you want. And we even have, it is not here right now, it's coming very, very soon. If you ask your API developer to give you a Swagger file, most APIs, they create a definition to describe the API first in a format called Swagger. And that's something that you can upload directly to the NetScaler. It'll create the WAF profile policy for you. You just have to bind it to the vServer and you're done. You have a secure, precise configuration of what that API is supposed to deliver. So we'll pop it over to Michael now to talk about protecting your Citrix gateway with some of the security features we have on NetScaler.
All right, sounds good. Thank you again, Ronan. So being that a lot of our audience, of course, are large Citrix shops, and NetScalers are often used to be fronting gateway, Citrix services using the Citrix gateway or NetScaler gateway function in there. We wanted to make sure we had some time to talk about this. So we talked about a lot of interesting things here so far today, WAF, bot management and things. And do these apply to protecting Citrix gateway? Yes, they absolutely do. Bot management can be used to protect the portal page when it's being rendered. We can use features like IP reputation, rate limiting, bot signatures to reduce potential attacks on the gateway. And even again, as I mentioned early on in the presentation, if the traffic is that they're in scripts that are being executed against the site aren't relevant, maybe someone's mistargeted as a site scraping, like a retail scraping type of operation, it's still sucking bandwidth away. So having it drop the traffic and not interfering with things is very beneficial. And things like IP reputation can certainly just block malicious IPs from trying to take other actions as well. WAF on the login page form submission as well, that can protect against a number of protections on the Citrix gateway or NetScaler gateway portal page or the AAA login pages as well. And this is important because obviously, it's a login page that can gain access with the appropriate credentials or whatnot, could gain access into the environment. So if there's a way to actually exploit the login page in some way, we want to make sure that we can protect it. Now, that being said, the code on the NetScaler gateway is updated fairly periodically. There's a lot of work that goes into it. It's not like it's updated once every few years or something. So vulnerabilities are continually patched and improved upon on these things. But with that in mind, it's important to understand that some companies do elect to try and use a third-party WAF to front a Citrix gateway, and that can cause some problems. Certain traffic, like HDX traffic in particular, doesn't play well. In fact, it's generally going to break if you try and front that HDX traffic with a WAF. The NetScaler has to be the termination point for that type of traffic. A third-party WAF could be used if you separate out the traffic flows for authentication versus HDX using something like optimal gateway routing. You could do that because the actual authentication page, you could use another WAF for that if you split it out like that to satisfy that limitation. However, we should bear in mind that comes with its own challenges as well. Not only some of the challenges that Ronan has advised on, but we've also seen customers use third-party WAFs against the Citrix gateway page there, where they rely on the client IP address coming in for various operations and even billing and other compliance requirements. And the Cloud WAF is overriding the IP addresses of the client IP, so that's not being seen by the NetScaler, which is causing them all sorts of other problems. So having the WAF run on the NetScaler itself for this type of traffic is quite viable and popular to do. And the other advantage is that it's also not forcing the traffic to go through two different passes. It's going through one pass here. So let's divide this up into two ways. Is that there's a number of other protections you can use for on the NetScaler as well on the Citrix gateway. We've talked a bit about IP filtering from IP reputation or geo-blocking using the geo-blocking DB. We all know that we've been in the industry long enough for a lot of us that it's easy to spoof IP addresses of coming from different countries, but why make it easy? So the fact that you can actually apply geo-blocking as well, or even just whitelisting, if you will, only want to allow people from the US and Canada, for example, to access your Citrix gateway, you can do so in there. Next on that, being able to apply SSL TLS profiles and HTTP and TCP security and whatnot is another big advantage that we certainly want to see on a gateway as well. And we flip over to the authentication realm. using advanced authentication capabilities on NetScaler, such as N-factor, whatnot, to build custom logic and conditional logic for authenticating users with various multi-factor authentications, or take actions based on group membership, or even where the clients, the IPs are coming from, or even their device posture state. We can do it on the NetScaler to enhance security and provide further protections. And we can also add things like max login attempts on the AAA V server and the Citrix Gateway V servers. And essentially those just help mitigate against brute force attacks and password spraying attacks as well. So if someone, whether they've got a valid or non-valid list of usernames they're trying to hit the NetScaler with to log in, why process each one of those requests and send it to your backend auth server, where after 5 failed attempts, it's just going to block it for that given user that it's trying with and move forward. So we're reducing noise on the network as well as potential resource overload. I'm going to talk about IP reputation. So I've mentioned it a couple of times myself, but Ronan's mentioned it as well. And just to delve a little bit deeper into that and just highlight a bit, this is a really simple feature to enable on the NetScaler if you're licensed for it. So what IP reputation does is essentially activates a feature on the appliance. You generally need an extra 4 gigs of RAM, which is just a consideration if you're sizing these for VPXs, for example, because it's a database that comes from WebRoot, our partner, that updates the IP database of malicious IPs dynamically about every 5 minutes. So when you've got that enabled, the database gets downloaded to memory, and then it's a matter of just applying a simple expression in a responder policy and binding it to your gateway or globally or whatnot that essentially says, great, if the client address is coming from is malicious, then drop it or reset it. Generally, you want to drop it, because if you reset, you're giving an acknowledgement to the source that an action has been taken, which may not be desirable. Or as Ronan mentioned before, you can also craft these to drop it for specific categories. But in the case of a gateway, I can't think of any valid reason why a bot really should be hitting a Citrix gateway. So just is malicious. If it's on the list, drop it seems to be valid in my mind, but open to hearing the different use cases where it may not be desirable to do that. So we talked about a lot here. We just got a few minutes left. I'm going to hand it back over to Ronan to just recap on what we've just discussed in here today about app security for cloud and close this out.
Just a quick one on the IP reputation. This is not just an integration. Other vendors provide an integration, but you still have to go buy the IP reputation service from WebRoot. NetScaler includes it with Premium Edition. So when you buy NetScaler with WAF and bot, you get IP reputation. You not just get the integration, you get the full thing, right? There's no additional purchase there. You don't have to buy anything else from anyone else. So the technical benefits, you get a super fast WAF, right? We've talked about the hybrid security model, positive and negative security models. You know, the WAFs you have in the cloud, we spoke about that already. They're also kind of basic, they're signature based. And we also have signatures as part of the hybrid security model. Ours get updated regularly. We also include in that, you get bot mitigation added in there, and that all gives you better out of the box protection. So if we look at the other benefits that we have for Web Application Firewall specifically, you know, the OWASP top 10, we have a style book. You can just do with a few clicks, you can get the OWASP top 10 protection. We have our custom signatures. If you need to customize or do something specifically yourself, our signatures are transparent, right? You can go, you can look at the XML, you can create your own. We have the integration with your vulnerability scanner and NetScaler console WAF recommendations, right? If you don't have that other scanner. So without going through this exhaustively, WAFs help you attain PCI DSS compliance. If you're processing any credit card data with your WAF, you need to be PCI compliant, otherwise you may be prevented from processing credit card transactions. There's a PCI DSS compliance report on the WAF, which will examine the configuration. You can print that out. There is no magic bullet for, you know, it won't give you PCI compliance immediately because PCI is bigger than that, but it'll cover a large part of it. We have, you know, you can import, export the rules that we have there. Same with the WAF profiles. And our signatures are based on Snort, which is a, you know, it's a public type of format. So if you have a Snort signature you want to apply, it's easy to move that and create ours, create one from there as well. And we've shown you the centralized reporting that we have in in ADM or NetScaler console. So some of the other benefits that you have, bot mitigation, right? So blocking bots, we know why bots are bad. You know, having, first of all, identifying them, is seeing what they are, and you can very easily use any of the features that we have here to block the bots. Some of the ones like rate limiting and IP reputation, they're very easy to configure from within the bot UI. But if you need something more advanced and more bespoke, those features are available outside of the bot as well. Now, lastly, some of the business benefits that you have. Obviously, you know, it's a lower cost. Doing more with an ADC, you have your load balancing, you have SSL offload, your SSL certificate management, WAF and bot all on one platform. That's going to reduce network bloat in terms of managing multiple devices. It's also going to reduce the management overhead and also, you know, maintenance support of those devices. And lastly, more importantly, the performance of your applications. If it has to pass through multiple devices or long paths of devices, that's going to slow things down, right? So the key is premium. The premium edition on NetScaler will give you everything that you need. So if there's just, you know, 3 things if you were to take away from this, right? The first thing is protecting internal and external web apps and APIs is important. Don't just think my external website's hosted somewhere else. What apps do you have internally? Most of the big attacks that you see are when an attacker gains access to someone's network and then they move laterally inside someone's network. And the crown jewels, not necessarily on the public website, the crown jewels is your customer confidential information you have on your internal websites. So, you know, having one big WAF on the outside of your network or in the cloud isn't enough. It's not the panacea that you need. You need to have protection in front of any of your web applications. The second point to make is a consistent security posture is important for your management and your ease of mind. There's no point having a protection format, one protection format for external and a completely separate protection system for internal, because they both work differently. And you'll have to update and manage those 2 separate systems independently. Again, overhead of management, you know, you have different rules for external and internal, and then you're going to miss something. And that's where you leave a chink in the armor, and that's what gets exploited. Lastly, all of that is the ease of deployment. It's using NetScaler console. It's used for managing fleets of NetScalers regardless of where those NetScalers live. Are they on your internal network? Are they in your DMZ? Are they in the cloud? Doesn't matter. You can see everything from one pane of glass, and you have one security dashboard that will give you visibility over your whole network, APIs, internal, external, and your web applications. So I think that's all we have time for. We're over the hour, Amber, you predicted it correctly.
Yeah, 5 minutes, hey? Awesome. I do have one question that I'd like to address if that's possible. The question is, can you block a threat from the console, and can an email alert be sent when a threat is detected?
Yes. So console has multiple alerting mechanisms, email alerting, SMSs. I can create a ServiceNow ticket. I can, you know, have a Slack message pop into your group. We have lots of alerting that can be configured from NetScaler console.
Awesome. I appreciate that. For today, I wanted to say thank you very much to Ronan and Michael. Lots of great information. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know how much time and energy goes into putting a webinar like this together to share valuable information. Thank you once again. It's great to have you here, and thank you to our audience for being patient with us.
Thank you, Amber, for hosting this. And for anyone else on the call, if your organization does need any assistance with implementing NetScaler security features, we've worked on some of the largest WAF environments in the world on NetScaler, and are quite well versed and do a lot of security audits on these things as well. So we're more than happy to help you or guide you in terms of how to implement these features across your portfolio.
All right. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.